Today we'll cover how to hire good employees. It's important to note that you need to ensure that these techniques are allowed in your given state, province, or country, as each has different rules. The single biggest driver of growth is talent. Without good employees, you will fail. Oftentimes these key players or these key performance employees are called A players. You want A players in every single role. If you start bringing on B or even C players, oftentimes your A players, if you have any, they will just get so frustrated that they will either become B or C players themselves, or more likely they will simply leave. Worse off, if you start bringing on B and C players and plug them into managerial or HR roles, they will automatically start hiring other B and C players, oftentimes because they get intimidated by A players, and all of a sudden you end up on this slippery slope with nothing but B and C players, and really at that point in time you got one foot in the grave, if not both. That is why you need to handle the hiring at least out of the gate to ensure that you only plug in A players into every single role. That way you can ensure that you control the entire process. If you're unsure which role to hire and in which order, write me a comment below and I'll make a custom video on that. It can oftentimes be very confusing to actually figure out, especially in which order that you want to hire, the most ideal order. So write me a comment below if this is something that you just really don't know what to do, and I'll make a custom video for you on that, on how to do that exactly. While you're at it, make sure to hit that notification button and hit that notification bell as well. So these techniques that I'm about to share with you here in a second or two, I have literally learned over about 15 years of making a ton of mistakes and read a lot of books on how to improve my hiring process. I'm really hoping that you can get immense value out of this. They have worked tremendously for me, and this process that I use now, I've literally used this to hire well over 50 people, if not close to 100. At this point I've lost track. But before we get into it, let's cover these three different types of personalities. I briefly mentioned A, B, and C players. So first, the first type is A players. They're the star performers. They're the top 10% of the talent. They strive for excellence. They always continually want to do better. They're high performers. They can oftentimes be risk takers also. But that works fine if you have had them for a while and you trust them. Then it's a calculated risk on their end oftentimes. If you yourself are not an A player, if you start doubting that maybe you're not, you're going to need to fix that. You will never hire A players if you're a B and C player, and quite frankly, if you're a B and C player, I don't know why you have your own business. You need to get better, because it's not going to work. It's not going to end up well for you. So and that's fine if you're in this situation, then coming to terms with that. There's nothing wrong with that. That's actually very powerful. There's ways of becoming an A player. It's not that complicated. It just takes a lot of work, as anything. If that's something you're interested in, or if you in any way feel like maybe, I'm a sort of A player but not full A player, you can always get better, right? Let me know. Write me a comment below and I'll make a custom video on how to become an A player. Moving down the list is B players. They're very steady performers. They oftentimes do not leave the position they're in. They tend to be fairly happy employees to sort of settle down. They just don't have the drive of A players. If you realize that you have a couple of B players in-house, you've had them for a while and you never had issues with them and they perform fine, like they're steady performers, maybe don't stress out about it. Like, there are certain roles where you might not need an A player. Like, A players obviously is always ideal, but there could be positions like, accounting. I'm not sure how many A players you'll be able to find in accounting. Just the type of personality that likes accounting tends to be a lot more leveled out and just sort of does their work. And then in that case, a B player could probably work. Obviously, if you can get an A player, that is better, but I wouldn't stress out about it if you have B players in certain roles. A role like sales, having a B player is probably not going to be very good, but maybe in your situation it works, or maybe temporarily it's okay, or maybe you think you can convert them later on into an A player. C players are the very last. They are the ones who oftentimes just do just enough work not to get fired. They sort of just do the bare minimum, which ironically almost always results in them getting fired. You really do not want to hire any C players at all. It becomes blatantly obvious when you talk to one during the interview process, which we'll cover a little bit later in the video. If you do have C players on staff currently, try and start up some new training programs and really see if you can upgrade them into B players, because it's not going to work long term if they remain C players. Hopefully some of them will be able to become B players. A fair bit of them will not be able to, and unfortunately you're going to have to let them go. And I know this sucks, especially if you've had them for a while and you like them, they're nice people. They're human beings. You don't want to cause damage in any way. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a lot of C players in your company and you tolerate them, they will bring down. If you start bringing on A players and maybe some B plus players, they will bring them down. It's going to happen. If you have an A player that's surrounded by C players, he or she will either get so frustrated and just give up, or they will simply just convert to a C player, as I mentioned already. So you do need to deal with this, and it is important to sort of look at the big picture here. It's not just about them and you not wanting to sort of let them go. It's a much bigger picture here, because if you allow them to perform at the current level, you're at a high chance that your company is going to go down. It's just going to happen because they're not good enough. And when your company goes down, the A or B players that you have on staff and all the other C players, they all lose their jobs. You lose your income. Every single person has families. They now lose income. The value that you generated into society through your business is now gone. So quite literally, you have made the world worse by keeping them on because you didn't want to hurt their feelings. So you do need to deal with this, and I know it sucks. I've had to deal with it. It's not fun, but you do need to deal with it. But again, try and see if you can convert them to a B player. Some will, and the few that you are able to convert into B players, they will absolutely love you for it, because they realize the flaws in the C player mentality, and you've now made them better people, and they will absolutely love you for it. Next is how to attract these A players. Before we cover that though, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the little notification bell so you're notified when there's another video. Lastly, write me a comment if there's anything and I'll make sure to cover it. So how do we attract these A players? Well, they want to be in an environment where they know they can thrive, where there's room to grow. So it's not just a matter of paying them well, you need to have a player attracting culture. So if your culture is not currently A player friendly, that's actually okay. That's very common. You can just start working on it while you start hiring people. And quite frankly, a lot of A players will actually love the challenge of helping you improve with the process and the culture and making it A player friendly. These kind of people, they like challenges, they love challenges. So if you bring them on and they know, it's not perfect, and there's a little rust on the side and whatever, they will love the challenge of being allowed to help with improving that. So to some extent, it could actually be an asset to you that the culture is not perfect yet. They will love to be able to help with that. But let's cover a couple of ways that you can attract them. So one easy one is obviously what we covered, is to have a strong culture, which you can work on. The other one is room to growth, and that room to grow, and that is huge. If they feel like the ceiling is very low, that's going to be they're not going to be super happy about that. Another one is it needs to be a fun and challenging environment. They need to be challenged. They need to have fun. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And then the last one is pay. So you need to pay them well. And if you have any kind of stock options, or maybe they can get a percentage depending on the role, any kind of thing that aligns their objectives with yours. So the more money you make, the more they make. A players absolutely thrive in an environment like that. So how do you recruit A players? Well, the first way is to have a very professional job listing that clearly explains that you are a growing company. They like to hear that, and they want to be a part of that. If you are a small business, that is actually okay. Oftentimes, of course, the ceiling issue could potentially be an issue, but the last thing an A player wants to be is in some big bureaucratic monstrosity. It's just does not work for them at all. So the fact that you are a small or medium-sized business is oftentimes an asset. My preferred way of handling this is to send everyone a questionnaire, because this allows you to cut away all the little tire kickers that you don't really want working for you anyway. Once you have the applications, then you thoroughly review the application, and then you interview all the good ones. A little bonus tip: if you can do this, you can send them I don't know, it depends on your industry, right? But it's worked well for me. Send them off a test task. So I will oftentimes design the test task to be slightly confusing, maybe even impossible to do, because I want to see how they handle that very low level stress. Because if they can't handle that small stress, real world stress is absolutely just going to destroy them. They'll crumble under it. So it's a great way to stress test them and see how they handle stress. So we've now cut down to all the applicants that appear to be good, and now we want to interview these people. It is ideal that you do this with a manager who's sort of been trained in how you want to interview people, but in the beginning you can do it by yourself. That's what I did in the very beginning. It works just fine. It's just not perfect, but that's okay. First off, you want to sort of do a little bit chit chat because most people will be nervous. So I like to chit chat a little bit, ask where they're from, just the usual kind of chit chat to get them calmed down. I'll often explain this is just a very relaxing call. I'm just trying to get to know you better to see if you're a good fit for my company, etc., etc. Just get them calmed down. And then overall, you should plan for this call to last about an hour. Or if you do it physically, it's the same, but it should last about an hour. The first one we dig into then is education. I do that first because it shows how they've developed as a human being over time, because obviously when they're going through the education, they're a lot younger than during their work experience. But also, I don't think education is terribly important. Obviously, you need a basic education for your trade and whatever you do. But I would rather hire a solid A player with bad grades than a C player with fantastic grades. And there are lots of people like that out there, unfortunately. Grades has really no use in the real world, in my opinion. But it still sort of shows how to develop, and it gives them a basic skill set, of course. A couple of things you can dig into would be high points and low points during the education period. This gives you very useful data. And then also if they took any kind of initiative, which is very, very useful when someone has done that. That is a big positive. We then dig into their work experience, which is very, very important. You really want to spend a lot of time on their various work experience. There's a couple of questions you can ask them. We've got how did you find the job when you started? What shape was the business in? Any kind of major challenges you faced? What results did you achieve that you're particularly proud of? And then this one is really good. I always like to ask this. I make it sort of explain like this. We all make mistakes. If you had a time machine and you could go back and change something during this work experience, what would you change differently? And what would you do differently? And there's always sort of like a little chuckle, which is good. It sort of gets people to relax, and it really shows how they, it's a very useful question to ask. Then we have, what was it like working for your old boss? What's his strengths and weaknesses? If they're overly critical here, that's obviously a big red flag. So that's why we ask this. And then the last one I'd like to ask is, if I were to ask your boss, what would he say? What are your strengths, your weaknesses, and your overall performance? And that one is very good. You will notice they go dead quiet oftentimes because this is a tough question, which is why you kind of want to ask it. So it's a very, very, very good question to ask. Then the next one is plans and goals for the future. You kind of want to dig into this to see if the current position that they're applying for is actually a match for their plans and goals for the future, because you really want to limit churn. It's very costly bringing someone on, training them, and then they quit because the job wasn't right for them. You really want to limit that. So that's why this section is very, very powerful. I have a couple of good questions that I typically ask. So we got, what are you looking for in your next job? What other job possibilities are you looking at right now, and how do you feel about each one of them? Describe your ideal position and what makes it ideal. And then lastly, how does this position square with your ideal position? And oftentimes when you start going through these list of questions, people will just say things. It always baffles me when they say this, but they will just blatantly, I guess because you've just built up rapport over the call, but they will blatantly just say, well, I want to do that, and that is not remotely in alignment with this job position. So then you just know, you're sitting there, well, why did you apply, right? They're just looking for a job to keep them going for the next couple of months, which is fine, but they sort of just slipped up a bit there, I guess. So then well, do you really want to bring them on and train them if they're going to quit 6 months or a year from now, right? That's why this section is very powerful. So the final part of this is reference checks, and they are absolutely mandatory. You have to do them every single time. I decide, I'm just not going to do it this time. I almost always regretted it. And it's so quick to do, there's no reason to skip it. No matter how good you feel about the applicant, you really gotta do reference checks. And if someone doesn't have references and if they've had all these other job positions, you really gotta ask yourself, why don't they have that? They probably lied about something. So before you call any references, make sure that you get the applicant to tell his past manager, his or her past manager, that you will be calling, because obviously they will not be, if you get a random call from some guy or girl, they might not be so willing to hand off private information, right? That would, probably in some states, provinces, or countries, that would probably be illegal. So make sure you do that. That also gives them the chance to sort of think over, well, how was this person? How were they? What kind of employee were they? It gives them a little bit of time to prep for the call, I guess, to some extent. And then when you call them, I have a couple of really good questions that I like to ask them. Oftentimes I just do a little bit of quick chit chat as usual, just to kind of calm them down. But keep in mind, these people are busy. oftentimes managers or owners, so do not waste your time. I like to say this will be super quick. I'll take no more than 5 minutes of your time, and then I'll be out of your hair. And then I have a couple of questions I ask. So we really want to confirm the dates that they were employed. So what the applicant said, was that actually true? You want to confirm their responsibilities. Does that match? Is there a disconnect? And then you want to ask what their overall performance were. And then I have a little bit of a bonus tip. I always like to ask the old manager, if this person were to apply again, would you hire them again? And that is a super powerful question, because if they will start handing off all kinds of information, typically like, oh my God, yeah, this person was fantastic. I would hire them in a heartbeat. And then you got a good one at that point. So you're now done. You now have one or many A players that appear to be a good match. And this is a very effective process. Like I will oftentimes we'll get 300-400 applicants, and we cut it down. So we file a test task, the whole thing, and we will interview maybe 5 of them. And oftentimes, four of them will be pretty good that we interview. So we really don't waste much time. We don't interview a ton of people that aren't good matches. And then maybe we'll do reference checks on 2, maybe 3 of them, and then we pick one of them. So it's a very effective process. I hope you enjoyed this. Please hit the like button if you did. That way I know that this was a good video and you want more of this. If there's any other challenges you have, write me a comment below, and then I'll be sure to make a video on it if it's something I can help you with. And thanks for watching.